In a small rural village, where the red earth cracked beneath the hot sun, lived Chinedu and his wife Adaeze with their 3 children, Hugo, Ifunanya, and little Kamsi. Each morning, they woke not to the smell of breakfast, but to the sound of empty stomachs growling. Adaeze would scrape the bottom of a clay pot, hoping to find a few grains of rice or a pinch of gari. Often, there was none. She would then tie a wrap around her waist, forcing a smile so her children would not see her despair. Chinedu worked as a farm laborer, but the pay was barely enough to buy palm oil, let alone feed 5 mouths 3 times a day. The children's eyes often lingered on the school nearby where other children carried books and laughed in the yard. They longed to join them, but their parents could not afford the fees, uniforms, or even sandals. That morning, Hugo asked softly, "Mama, will we eat today?" Adaeze swallowed the lump in her throat and whispered, "God will provide." With no food to serve, Adaeze sent the children to fetch water from the stream. They carried plastic jerrycans, their little feet trudging along the dusty path. Other children skipped past in clean school uniforms, carrying books and lunch boxes. Hugo and Ifunanya lowered their eyes, ashamed. When they reached the stream, they filled their containers and sat under a tree for shade. Ifunanya sighed. "Brother, why can't we go to school like them?" Hugo forced a smile. "One day, Ify. One day." Little Kamsi, only 4, hugged his brother's arm and whispered, "I'm hungry." His voice was so small it broke Hugo's heart. They walked home slowly, dreaming of a life beyond hunger and longing for the chance to learn their letters and numbers. That evening, Adaeze sat outside their mud hut, her wrapper slipping loosely from her thin frame. She watched her children play with stones, pretending they were toys. Their laughter sounded forced, and it pierced her soul. She turned away and wept silently, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. She thought about her own childhood. She had gone to school for a few years before poverty pulled her out. She had dreamed of becoming a teacher, but life had stolen that chance. Now, she feared her children's dreams would be buried the same way. Chinedu returned late, carrying only a handful of cassava he had been paid with. They boiled it and shared it in silence. The children ate eagerly, but it was not enough. Adaeze whispered a prayer into the night sky. "God, send us help before we break." The next morning, the landlord arrived, a stern-faced man tapping his walking stick against the cracked mud wall. "Chinedu," he barked, "you owe 3 months' rent. If you don't pay by the end of the week, I'll throw you out." Chinedu bowed his head in shame. "Please, give me more time. I'm working hard," the landlord scoffed. "Hard work doesn't pay rent. 7 days, or you and your family will sleep on the road." Adaeze stood behind her husband, holding Kamsi, trembling. The children clung to her wrapper, frightened. For the rest of the day, silence filled the house. Fear settled like a heavy cloud. That night, Ifunanya had a dream. She saw herself in a neat school uniform, writing on a chalkboard. Her teacher praised her, and her classmates clapped. She woke up with a smile, but when she opened her eyes to the leaking roof and empty mat beside her, the smile faded. "Mama," she whispered as Adaeze stirred, "will I ever go to school?" Adaeze pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "One day, my child." Don't stop dreaming. Ifunanya nodded, holding onto the dream like a secret treasure. She promised herself she would never give up, no matter how poor they were. The next morning, Chinedu left before dawn to work in another man's field. He toiled under the blazing sun, his back bent, sweat dripping from his forehead. For every row he weeded, he earned only a handful of maize. By midday, his body shook with exhaustion, but he kept going, thinking of his children's hollow eyes. "I must provide," he whispered, even as blisters formed on his hands. When he returned, his children ran to him, hoping for food. He gave them the maize he earned. They boiled it, and though it wasn't much, the children danced with joy, pretending it was a feast. Days passed, and the food ran out again. Adaeze tried to make a watery soup from leaves she gathered, but the children cried from hunger before it was ready. Little Kamsi clutched his belly, moaning softly. "Mama, it hurts," he whispered. Adaeze hugged him tightly, tears rolling down her cheeks. Hugo tried to be strong, saying, "Don't worry, Kamsi. I'll find something." He ran outside, searching for fallen mangoes or anything edible. But the trees were bare. He returned empty-handed, ashamed. Adaeze held her 3 children close, whispering prayers into their ears. One morning, as Adaeze fetched water at the stream, she overheard 2 women talking. "Did you hear? A wealthy man from the city has returned to the village. They say he's generous and helps the poor." Adaeze's heart skipped. She hurried home to tell Chinedu. "Maybe he can help us," she said, her eyes glistening. Chinedu frowned. "We cannot beg, Adaeze, but what about the children?" "Sometimes God sends helpers through people." Chinedu remained silent, torn between pride and desperation. That evening, the children overheard their parents talking. Ifunanya spoke up bravely. "Papa, please, let us meet the man. We want to go to school. We want to eat and learn like the others." Hugo added, "It's not begging. It's asking for a chance." Chinedu looked at his children's hopeful faces, then at Adaeze, who nodded gently. His heart softened. "All right," he sighed. "Tomorrow, we will go." The children clapped with joy, their first genuine laughter in weeks filling the room. The next morning, the family set out together. They wore their cleanest clothes, though they were still torn and faded. Adaeze carried Kamsi on her back, and Hugo held Ifunanya's hand. They walked through the village, drawing sympathetic glances. Some villagers whispered, "That's Chinedu's family. Poor people, may God help them." At the edge of the village stood a large compound with painted walls and an iron gate. The family stopped, staring in awe. Chinedu took a deep breath, his pride warring with his love for his children. Adaeze touched his arm gently. "For them," she whispered. He knocked on the gate. One morning, as Chinedu and Adaeze sat outside their hut, a tall man in a simple but clean white kaftan walked into the village. His face carried warmth and dignity. His name was Chief Okafor, a wealthy man from the nearby town who often traveled to the villages to buy farm produce. And like many rich men, Chief Okafor had a gentle spirit and eyes that noticed suffering. He saw the children with sunken cheeks and thin legs, and his heart clenched. "Good morning, my people," he greeted kindly. Adaeze bowed respectfully, embarrassed by her tattered wrapper. But Chief Okafor smiled. "Don't hide your pain. Every family deserves dignity. Tell me, when was the last time you ate?" Chinedu swallowed hard, unable to answer. Adaeze's eyes filled with tears. That was answer enough. Chief Okafor turned to his servants, who carried baskets. "Bring it out," he commanded. From the baskets came rice, beans, yams, dried fish, and palm oil. Adaeze covered her mouth with her hands, trembling. "Eat, my children," Chief Okafor said. "No family should go hungry while I walk this land." Chinedu could barely contain his gratitude. He knelt before the chief. "You have saved us, sir." The children clapped weakly, their eyes glowing for the first time in months. That night, the family feasted. The aroma of yam porridge filled the compound, and for once, laughter echoed from their hut. As the children ate, Adaeze whispered to her husband, "You see, God has not forgotten us." Tears ran down her cheeks as she fed the youngest child spoonfuls of beans. For the first time in years, Adaeze felt the taste of hope. Chief Okafor returned the next day to check on them. "Food fills the stomach, but knowledge fills the future," he said. "Do your children attend school?" Adaeze lowered her eyes. "No, sir. We cannot afford it." Chief Okafor's heart grew heavier. He looked at the bright eyes of the children and thought of wasted potential. Chief Okafor made a decision. "From today, your children will go to school. I will pay for everything: uniforms, books, even shoes." Adaeze gasped. Chinedu stammered, "Sir, we cannot repay." "You owe me nothing," Chief Okafor interrupted gently. "The only repayment I ask is that you raise them to be honest, hardworking, and kind." The children's eyes lit up. Ifunanya whispered, "Mama, will I wear shoes?" Adaeze laughed through her tears. "Yes, my child. Shoes will carry you to school." A week later, the children stood in new uniforms, their tiny feet now snug in black shoes. Ifunanya twirled in excitement, touching her satchel. Chinedu and Adaeze could hardly believe their eyes. As they walked to the school gates, villagers whispered in amazement, "Are those not Chinedu's children? Who dressed them so well?" Adaeze held her head high, proud for the first time in years. The school bell rang, and the children ran inside, laughter trailing behind them. That evening, the children returned home, bubbling with stories. Ifunanya recited the alphabet she had learned. Hugo showed his exercise book filled with numbers. Adaeze's heart swelled with pride, watching her children bloom. Chinedu, once weighed down with shame, now walked with a straighter back. He tilled his small farm with renewed vigor, for he believed their lives could change. At night, the family gathered by the fire, singing songs of joy instead of mourning their hunger. Other villagers, who once mocked Chinedu and Adaeze, began to whisper, "See how their children shine now," they said. Some felt jealousy, but others were inspired. They approached Chinedu for advice on how to approach Chief Okafor. Chinedu replied humbly, "He came to us because of our suffering. Perhaps if you live honestly and do not hide your struggles, he may also see your pain." Adaeze noticed a change. Respect was slowly returning to their name. Chief Okafor noticed Adaeze's tattered wrapper one day and asked his servants to bring cloth from the market. He handed her a bundle of bright anchor fabric. "A mother who carries dignity deserves to wear dignity," he said. Adaeze bowed, speechless. When she wore the wrapper, she looked like a queen to Chinedu. For the first time in many years, Adaeze stood before a mirror and saw herself not as a beggar, but as a woman of worth. With his farm tools breaking down, Chinedu often struggled. Chief Okafor, observing his determination, gifted him new hoes and cutlasses. "A man must have tools to build his future," he said. Chinedu wept openly. "Sir, you give me more than I can ever repay." Chief Okafor placed a hand on his shoulder. "One day, Chinedu, you will help another. That will be repayment enough." Chinedu felt his dignity return. Each strike of the hoe into the earth now carried hope, not despair. As weeks passed, Chinedu's farm flourished. With good tools and renewed energy, he harvested more than ever before. He sold some in the market and bought small treats for his children, groundnuts and oranges. Adaeze's laughter returned, filling the air like music. The children grew stronger, brighter, and full of dreams. The family that once starved now walked with dignity. And all because one man chose kindness over indifference. But this was only the beginning. Greater blessings lay ahead. Ifunanya stood happily at the school gate, her uniform crisp and new, the bag on her shoulders still smelling of fresh fabric. 4 years she had watched other children walk past her home, their laughter ringing in her ears as they discussed lessons she could only dream of attending. But now, she was one of them. Her mother walked beside her, holding her hand tightly as though afraid this moment might disappear. When the bell rang, Ifunanya joined her classmates inside, her eyes wide as she took in the chalkboard, the books, and the teacher who smiled kindly at her. For the first time, Ifunanya felt a deep sense of belonging, a door opening to a world she had longed for. That evening, the family sat around their wooden table, bowls filled with steaming rice, beans, and stew. It was a far cry from the scraps and hunger pangs they had endured for years. Ifunanya, unable to contain herself, clapped her hands and said, "Mama, my stomach is full." The whole family laughed, the sound echoing in the small room like music. Their father smiled as he watched his children eat until they were satisfied. It wasn't just food, it was dignity, warmth, and the promise that they would no longer face hunger's merciless grip. At school, Ifunanya quickly made friends. One girl, Ngozi, offered her a pencil when she had none. In return, Ifunanya shared part of her lunch, remembering the days when she had none to give. They became inseparable, walking home together, reading beneath trees, and sharing secrets. Through friendship, Ifunanya learned another kind of wealth, the joy of companionship, the beauty of giving and receiving, and the strength found in community. While Ifunanya thrived in her studies, Adaeze began learning new skills through programs supported by the kind chief. Sewing, farming techniques, and even basic literacy became part of her daily life. Slowly, the family was no longer only surviving, they were growing. They planted a small garden behind their home, which soon bloomed with vegetables. Each green leaf that sprouted was a reminder of resilience, of what could grow even in the harshest soil if only given a chance. Chinedu found purpose in guiding his children, teaching them wisdom and resilience. "Never forget where we came from," he told them one evening as they sat under the stars. "Hardship shaped us, but kindness lifted us." His words etched themselves into their hearts like eternal lessons. Years passed, and the family's life transformed. Ifunanya excelled in her studies, winning awards that brought pride not only to her family but to the entire village. Inspired by the kindness that had saved them, the family began helping others who were still struggling. They shared food from their big farm and the small garden behind their house, gave books to children who had none, and encouraged neighbors to dream beyond poverty's grip. Their story became one of hope, rippling through the community like light spreading in darkness. One day, Chief Okafor returned to visit the family. He was amazed at the transformation he saw. The once frail children were now strong and healthy, their faces bright with hope. The home, though still simple, radiated love and warmth. Tears filled his eyes as Ifunanya ran to him, calling him uncle. He had given them a seed, and they had nurtured it into a forest of blessings. "I only opened a door," he said softly. "You walked through it." Gratitude flowed like a river between them. Ifunanya stood before her school one day, gazing at the building with a determined smile. She dreamed of becoming a teacher, so no child would ever be denied the gift of education. "If I can do it, others can too," she whispered to herself. Her mother, Adaeze, watching from afar, felt her heart swell with pride. The chains of poverty had been broken, and in their place stood dreams as tall as mountains. The family gathered one evening around their table, now sturdier and surrounded by the fruits of their hard work. They shared laughter, stories, and a meal without fear of scarcity. Looking back, the days of hunger and despair seemed distant, like a bad dream that had finally faded. Poverty had tested them, but kindness, resilience, and love had carried them into a new dawn. And so, the story of this once poor family became a lesson whispered in the village for generations. Kindness has the power to break chains, to turn despair into hope, and to transform lives forever. The chief who gave them a chance, the mother who never gave up, the children who dreamed, they became proof that no matter how dark poverty's shadow, one light of compassion can ignite a fire that will never die.